He tossed the checkbook onto the glass desk like a dirty napkin. $1 million, he sneered, face gray with agony. Heal me. 60 seconds. Go. It was a rich man's cruel joke meant to break her. He didn't expect the exhausted single mother to actually do it. Maggie stared at the final notice on her phone screen until the red pixels blurred into a single, jagged line. Balance due, $4,200. To a man like Nathaniel Reed, $4,000 was a rounding error. The cost of a Tuesday night dinner in Manhattan. To Maggie, it was the exact sum required to keep her 7-year-old son, Toby, in the specialized physical therapy program that was finally teaching his legs to walk without heavy braces. She shoved the phone deep into the pocket of her navy blue scrubs. She didn't have time to cry. Crying was a luxury for people who had the energy to rebuild themselves afterward. Maggie worked on the 42nd floor of the Reed International Building, employed by the in-house Executive Wellness Center. It was a sterile, ridiculously expensive perk designed for executives who ran on caffeine, amphetamines, and sheer, unfiltered sociopathy. Maggie hated the clinic. The air smelled perpetually of eucalyptus and synthetic calm. But it paid $24 an hour, and her son's medical bills demanded every single cent. Down the hall, something shattered. The sound of breaking glass was followed by a low, furious shout. The clinic director, a nervous man named Harrison, came sprinting around the corner, his face completely bloodless. Maggie, get your kit, now. I'm off the clock in 10 minutes, Harrison. I have to pick up Toby from... Reed is having an episode, Harrison hissed, grabbing her elbow. He just fired 2 massage therapists and threw a crystal decanter at the wall. You're the only one left on the floor. Maggie stiffened. Everyone knew about Nathaniel Reed's episodes. The billionaire CEO was 41, built like a middleweight boxer, and possessed a mind that had revolutionized commercial logistics. But for the past 6 months, his body had been staging a violent rebellion. Rumors wildly varied. Some said it was a brain tumor. Others whispered about early-onset Parkinson's. The truth, known only to the medical staff he constantly berated, was severe, untreatable psychosomatic pain, cluster headaches that mimicked strokes, tension so severe his neck locked, and his blood pressure spiked to terrifying stroke-level heights. He had flown in neurologists from Switzerland and shamans from Peru. Nothing worked. I'm a physical therapist, Harrison, not a lion tamer, Maggie said, pulling her arm away. Call an ambulance. He refuses. He says if anyone calls an ambulance, he'll liquidate the entire wellness department by morning. Just go in there. Pretend to try. Do some deep tissue work. Just calm him down. Maggie thought of the red text on her phone. She thought of Toby's leg braces. Fine, she muttered. She walked down the quiet, carpeted hallway and pushed open the heavy oak doors to the CEO's corner office. The room was a monument to cold, hard success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a gray, rain-swept city. But Nathaniel Reed wasn't looking at the view. He was slumped in a leather chair behind his desk, clutching the back of his skull. He was breathing in ragged, shallow gasps. His expensive tailored suit jacket was discarded on the floor. His tie ripped loose. Sweat stained the collar of his dress shirt. "Get out!" Nathaniel choked out, not looking up. His voice was a rasp of pure agony. I told Harrison I don't want another incense-burning fraud touching me. I don't burn incense, Maggie said flatly. She closed the door behind her. The click echoed in the massive room. and I want to go home. So let's make this quick." Nathaniel's head snapped up. His eyes were bloodshot, the skin around them pale and tight. The sheer hostility radiating from him would have made a lesser person take a step back. But Maggie had spent 4 years as an ER trauma nurse before the schedule became impossible for a single mother. She had seen gunshot wounds and shattered femurs. A billionaire with a stress headache didn't scare her. "You think this is a joke?" Nathaniel stood up. The movement was jerky, uncoordinated. He pressed the heel of his hand against his right temple, wincing. "My skull feels like it's being crushed in a vice. The left side of my body is numb. I can't think. I can't work." "It's a sympathetic nervous system overload," Maggie said, walking toward him. She kept her voice even, clinical. "Your scalene muscles are spasming, compressing the nerves in your neck. You're suffocating your own brain." Nathaniel laughed. It was a terrible, jagged sound. "Oh, brilliant. Another diagnosis. The Mayo Clinic charged me $50,000 to tell me I was stressed." He leaned heavily against the desk, his legs trembling slightly. "You people are all the same. You peddle false hope, take my money, and leave me rotting in my own body." Maggie stopped a few feet away. She looked at him, really looked at him. He was a man who controlled everything, markets, thousands of employees, millions of dollars. But he couldn't control the meat and bone he lived in. His arrogance was just a cheap shield for absolute, blinding terror. He thought he was dying. "I don't want your money," Maggie said gently. "I just want to clock out. Sit down." "No." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. The pain was making him vicious. He reached into his pocket with a trembling hand and pulled out a leather-bound checkbook. He slammed it onto the glass desk. "You want to play the stoic healer? Fine." He grabbed a pen, his knuckles white. $1 million, right here, right now. Heal me. You have 60 seconds. If my pain is gone, you take the check and walk out. If you fail, you are fired. Harrison is fired. The whole department is gone." He looked at her, his expression twisting into a cruel sneer. "Go on, fix me." It was a trap. A cynical, ugly display of power from a man who wanted to drag someone else down into his misery. Maggie stared at the checkbook. Then she looked at the digital clock on his desk. It read 4:18 p.m. "Sit in the chair," Maggie said. I heard what you said," Maggie snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. The sudden authority in her tone made him blink. "You have 60 seconds. Don't waste 10 of them arguing with me. Sit down." Surprise flickered in Nathaniel's eyes, cutting through the haze of pain. Slowly, stiffly, he lowered himself into the leather chair. Maggie stepped behind him. She didn't ask about his childhood. She didn't tell him to visualize a calm beach. She didn't dim the lights. She looked at his posture. His shoulders were hiked up nearly to his ears, a primal guarding mechanism. His breathing was entirely in his upper chest, rapid, shallow, panicked. His body believed it was being hunted by a predator. 45 seconds, Nathaniel grit out through clenched teeth. "This is useless. I can feel the migraine cresting. It's going to—" "Shut up," Maggie said. She placed her hands on him. Not a gentle massage. Her grip was firm, structural, grounding. She found the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the thick band running down the side of his neck. It was rigid as concrete. "You're fighting your own skeleton, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice dropping into a low, steady rhythm. The tone she used to talk down panicking accident victims in the ER. Your brain is sending panic signals to your vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is locking your neck. You are trapping your own blood flow. She moved her thumbs to the base of his skull, right at the suboccipital ridge. 30 seconds, he whispered, a tremor in his voice. He squeezed his eyes shut. It hurts. God, it hurts. I know it does. I'm going to press down. It's going to hurt worse for exactly 3 seconds. Do not pull away. Maggie dug her thumbs deep into the bundle of nerves and muscle at the base of his skull. She applied heavy, sustained, unrelenting pressure. Nathaniel gasped, his entire body going rigid. His hands gripped the armrests of the chair so hard the leather groaned. Breathe out, Maggie commanded. I can't. Breathe out, Nathaniel, now. Push the air out of your stomach. He let out a ragged, shuddering exhale. As he did, Maggie hooked her fingers under his clavicle and physically forced his shoulders down, breaking the structural armor he had built around his neck. Hold the pressure, she muttered, watching the second hand on his desk clock sweep past. 15 seconds left. The human nervous system is complex, but it is also mechanical. When the vagus nerve is trapped by chronic tension, it creates a feedback loop of panic and pain. By physically depressing the shoulders and applying ischemic pressure to the suboccipital triangle, Maggie was essentially hitting a hard reset on his parasympathetic nervous system. It wasn't magic. It was plumbing. 10 seconds. Nathaniel's breathing hitched. The resistance in his neck suddenly gave way. The concrete melted. Maggie released the pressure immediately. She took a step back. 5 seconds, she said quietly. Nathaniel didn't move. His head hung forward. His hands slowly uncurled from the armrests. The deafening, roaring silence in the room was heavy. For a terrifying moment, Maggie thought she had triggered a syncope episode. But then, Nathaniel took a breath. Not a shallow, panicked gasp, but a deep, slow pull of air that expanded his rib cage and dropped into his diaphragm. He opened his eyes. The gray pallor of his skin was receding, replaced by a flush of healthy blood returning to his brain. He raised a hand, touching the back of his neck with trembling fingers. The vice was gone. The blinding light behind his eyes had vanished. There was a dull ache left behind, the ghost of the tension, but the catastrophic, world-ending agony was entirely erased. He slowly turned his head to look at her. The cynical, untouchable billionaire was gone. The man sitting in the chair just looked stunned, vulnerable, deeply, overwhelmingly tired. What? Nathaniel cleared his throat. His voice was incredibly quiet. What did you do to me? I turned off the alarm system, Maggie said, wiping her palms on her scrub pants. You've been driving your body with the emergency brake on for months. I just released the brake. Nathaniel stared at her. He looked at the clock. 1 minute and 20 seconds had passed since he issued the bet. He looked down at the checkbook sitting on his desk. The blank page mocked him. He had thrown out the number to humiliate her, to prove that everyone had a price and that no one could actually save him. He swallowed hard. Who are you? My name is Maggie O'Connor, she said, her tone perfectly polite, perfectly distant. She reached out, tapped the checkbook with her index finger, and looked him dead in the eye. And you owe me $1 million. Nathaniel Reed did not move. He stared at the woman standing in front of his desk. Maggie O'Connor. She wore faded navy scrubs that had been washed so many times the fabric was pilling at the seams. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a messy, utilitarian knot secured by a cheap plastic clip. There was a faint smudge of what looked like ultrasound gel on her left cuff. She was entirely unremarkable by the standards of the hyper-curated, aggressively polished world Nathaniel inhabited. Yet she was looking at him with an expression of absolute, unyielding stone. There was no intimidation in her eyes, no awe, not even greed. She just looked tired and entirely serious. Nathaniel looked down at the blank checkbook resting on the tempered glass. He had thrown the $1 million figure into the air like a weapon, fully intending it to act as a blunt instrument of humiliation. In his experience, everyone broke when you applied enough pressure. He had expected her to stammer, to offer a pathetic massage, to fail, and then to cower when he fired her. It was supposed to be a distraction from the blinding agony inside his own skull. But the agony was gone. He tentatively rolled his shoulders. The vertebrae in his neck popped, a dry, hollow sound in the silent office. The sickening, throbbing pressure behind his left eye, the pain that had dictated his waking hours and ruined his sleep for over half a year, was simply absent. He drew another deep breath. His lungs expanded fully. The air felt cold and clean. "You think I won't do it," Nathaniel said. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual booming authority. "I think you are a man who is used to throwing money at problems," Maggie replied, her tone conversational but clipped. "I solve the problem. I expect to be paid. I don't care if it hurts your pride. I care about my time, and my time is up. I have a son waiting for me." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. A flare of his trademark anger sparked in his chest, but it fizzled out almost instantly, smothered by a strange, heavy exhaustion. He grabbed the heavy Mont Blanc fountain pen resting next to the leather binder. He uncapped it. He wrote the date. He wrote her name, Maggie O'Connor, his hand writing a sharp, jagged scrawl. On the next line, he wrote the amount, 1,000,000. He filled in the numeric box. He signed his name with a violent slashing motion that nearly tore the thick paper. He ripped the check from the binding. The sound was unnervingly loud. He held it out across the desk. He expected her hand to shake. He expected her eyes to widen, for the mask to slip, for her to suddenly realize she was holding a piece of paper that fundamentally altered the trajectory of her human existence. Maggie reached out and took the check. Her hand was entirely steady. She didn't look at the zeros. She didn't gasp. She simply folded the heavy paper precisely in half, then in half again, and slipped it deep into the pocket of her scrub pants. "Drink water," she said, turning toward the heavy oak doors. "Your muscles are going to ache tomorrow. It's lactic acid. You essentially just ran a marathon while sitting in a chair. And stop drinking scotch before bed. It suppresses REM sleep and triggers sympathetic nervous system spikes." She didn't look back. The heavy door clicked shut behind her. Nathaniel was left alone in the cavernous office. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the lights of the Manhattan skyline into streaks of dirty yellow and gray. He sat back in his chair. He pressed his fingers against his own pulse at his throat. It was steady, 80 beats per minute, down from the frantic, terrifying 130 it had been hovering at for weeks. He picked up his desk phone and hit a single button. "Yes, Mr. Reed?" His assistant, a severely efficient woman named Brenda, answered instantly. "Get Harrison on the line," Nathaniel said, "and get me the personnel file for a clinic employee, Maggie O'Connor. I want it on my screen in 3 minutes." 30 floors down, Maggie walked out of the service elevator and into the damp, freezing evening air. She didn't take a cab. She walked 4 blocks to the subway station, descended the concrete stairs, and swiped her worn Metro card. She stood on the platform, surrounded by the tired, gray-faced commuters of the city. The rumble of the approaching train vibrated through the soles of her cheap sneakers. She reached into her pocket. Her fingers brushed against the folded square of paper. She didn't pull it out. She couldn't look at it here, in the grime and the noise. If she looked at it, if she acknowledged the reality of the ink and the signature, she might actually fracture. She had held herself together with medical tape and sheer willpower for 3 years, ever since Toby's diagnosis. Cerebral palsy, spastic diplegia. The words had sounded like a death sentence when the pediatric neurologist had spoken them. But Toby was a fighter. He had her stubbornness. He wanted to walk. He wanted to run. The specialized robotic-assisted therapy at the Children's Rehabilitation Center was producing miracles. It was also bankrupting her at a rate of $2,000 a week. The train arrived with a screech of metal. Maggie stepped into the crowded car, grabbed a stainless steel pole, and closed her eyes. Back in the penthouse office, Nathaniel Reed sat staring at his computer monitor. The personnel file was thin. Maggie O'Connor, 32 years old, former trauma nurse at Bellevue Hospital, fired for excessive absenteeism. Under the notes section, HR had meticulously documented the reason: chronic absences due to child's medical emergencies. Nathaniel scrolled down. He found the insurance claims. The clinic offered rudimentary health coverage to its hourly staff, but the network was brutally restricted. He looked at the list of denied claims. Pediatric physical therapy, denied. Out of network. Custom orthotic bracing, denied. Experimental. Botulinum toxin injections for spasticity, denied. Insufficient documentation. Nathaniel leaned back, rubbing his face with both hands. He thought about his own behavior. He thought about the $50,000 Mayo Clinic bill he had complained about. He thought about the temper tantrum he had thrown, breaking a crystal decanter against a wall because his neck hurt. He was a billionaire. He had built a logistics empire that moved millions of tons of freight across the globe. He considered himself a titan, a master of reality. But looking at the stark bureaucratic cruelty of Maggie O'Connor's life, Nathaniel felt a sudden, violently physical wave of nausea. He realized, with sudden and absolute clarity, that he was utterly pathetic. She had walked into a room containing a screaming, terrified, powerful man, recognized his pain, shut it off like a light switch, took his money, and walked back out into the cold to fight a real war. Nathaniel picked up the phone again. "Brenda," he said, his voice quiet. "Call the bank. Authorize a clearance on a personal check I just wrote. Check number 402. Do not put a hold on it. If the fraud department flags it, override them. I want those funds liquid the second they are deposited." The fluorescent lights of the Chase Bank branch in Queens buzzed with a low, irritating hum. It was 8:30 a.m. the next morning. Maggie sat in a faux leather chair opposite the branch manager's desk. The manager, a balding man named Mr. Henderson, was looking at the piece of paper on his desk as if it were coated in anthrax. He looked up at Maggie, taking in her exhausted face, her worn winter coat, and the dark circles under her eyes. "Ms. O'Connor," Henderson said slowly, steepling his fingers, "you understand my hesitation. This is a personal check for $1 million, drawn from the private account of Nathaniel Reed. You are a physical therapist. There is an enormous potential for misunderstanding here. Protocol requires me to place a standard 30-day hold on a sum of this magnitude until the issuing institution can verify the intent. Maggie felt the air leave her lungs. A 30-day hold. Toby's clinic required the outstanding $4,000 by Friday, or they would cancel his remaining sessions and give his slot to another child on the 3-year waiting list. Please, Maggie said. Her voice cracked. It was the first time she had shown weakness in years. Call them. Call the bank. Call Reed International. I earned that money. Henderson sighed deeply, clearly uncomfortable. I have already initiated the verification process, Ms. O'Connor. I am simply warning you that... The phone on his desk rang. It was a sharp, electronic chirp. Henderson picked it up, his expression thoroughly annoyed. Henderson. Yes, wait, who? The blood drained from the manager's face. He sat up completely straight, almost knocking over his coffee mug. Mr. Reed? Yes, sir. I apologize. Yes, she is sitting right here. Henderson listened for another 10 seconds. He swallowed audibly. Understood, sir. Immediately. Yes, good day. He placed the receiver back on the cradle with exaggerated care. He looked at Maggie, his eyes wide. The hold is bypassed, Henderson said, his voice entirely devoid of its previous condescension. The funds they are available now, Ms. O'Connor. They are in your account. Maggie stood up. Her legs felt like they were filled with wet sand. She walked out of the manager's office, out through the glass doors of the bank, and into the parking lot. She walked to her rusting 2011 Honda Civic, unlocked the door, sat in the driver's seat, and gripped the steering wheel. And then she broke. She leaned her head against the cold plastic of the steering wheel and sobbed. They were violent, ugly, gasping sobs that tore through her chest. It was the sound of 3 years of pure, unadulterated terror leaving her body. The eviction notices, the collections calls, the look of quiet disappointment in Toby's eyes when she had to say no to new toys, the crushing, suffocating weight of being solely responsible for a fragile human life with zero safety net. It was gone. She was free. 3 days later, the Children's Rehabilitation Clinic in Brooklyn smelled strongly of industrial floor cleaner and sweat. Toby, a small boy with an enormous gap-toothed smile and a mop of curly brown hair, was strapped into a complex pediatric exoskeleton. He was walking between parallel bars, his small hands gripping the metal tightly. Good, Toby. Push through the heel, Maggie encouraged, walking backward a few feet in front of him. Don't swing the hip, lift the knee. Toby gritted his teeth, his forehead shining with sweat. He lifted his right leg. The servo motors and the braces whined. He planted his foot down. It was clumsy, but it was a step. Got it, Mom, he beamed, out of breath. You're a rock star, kid, a deep voice said from the doorway. Maggie spun around. Nathaniel Reed was standing in the entrance to the physical therapy gym. He looked entirely out of place. He was not wearing his armor. The tailored suit was gone, replaced by a simple charcoal gray sweater and dark jeans. He looked human. He looked rested. Maggie instinctively stepped between Nathaniel and her son. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice dropping to a low, defensive register. If you want the money back, you can't have it. It cleared. My lawyer says it was a verbal contract fulfilled. Nathaniel held up both hands in a gesture of surrender. He walked slowly into the room, his eyes scanning the equipment, the worn mats, and finally resting on Toby. "I don't want the money back, Maggie," Nathaniel said quietly. "Keep it, every cent." "Then why are you in Brooklyn?" Nathaniel looked at her, really looked at her. "I came to apologize." Maggie crossed her arms. "You don't strike me as a man who apologizes." "I'm not," Nathaniel admitted, a faint self-deprecating smile touching the corners of his mouth. "I am arrogant. I am impatient. I am entirely too used to getting my own way. And last Tuesday, I treated you like garbage because I was terrified." He paused, looking down at his hands. "I spent the last 6 months thinking I was dying. I had the best doctors in the world tell me it was all in my head, which only made it worse. I was trapped. I had all the resources on Earth, and I was completely powerless." He looked back up, meeting her eyes. "You touched my neck, and you fixed it in 60 seconds. Not with magic, with competence. You saw what was actually wrong, and you dealt with it. And then I looked into your file, and I realized you were fighting a battle 10 times harder than mine, and you were doing it without complaining, without throwing decanters at the wall." Toby looked between his mother and the stranger. "Mom, who's the tall guy?" "He's a former patient, Toby," Maggie said softly, her defensive posture slightly relaxing. Nathaniel knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the boy. "Hi, Toby. I'm Nathaniel. Your mom is a very, very smart lady. She helped me out of a bad spot." "She helps me, too," Toby said proudly, tapping the metal strut of his brace. "I'm going to run soon." "I believe you," Nathaniel said seriously. He stood back up and looked at Maggie. "I resigned as CEO yesterday," Nathaniel said. Maggie blinked, stunned. "You what?" "I stepped down, taking a leave of absence to act as chairman of the board instead. The daily operations were killing me, literally." Nathaniel shoved his hands into his pockets. "I've decided I want to put my capital into things that actually matter, things that actually fix people." He gestured around the modest, slightly run-down clinic. "This place does good work, but they need newer equipment. They need better funding to expand their sliding scale program. I'm setting up a foundation, and I need a director of operations who understands the medical reality on the ground. Someone who doesn't take crap from anyone. Someone who knows how to apply pressure where it counts." Maggie stared at him. The air in the room felt suddenly charged, thick with an impossible reality. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership," Nathaniel corrected. "You keep the $1 million. That was for my neck. This is for the future. You have the empathy. You have the spine. I have the checkbook. Let's fix some things." Maggie looked at the billionaire who had tried to break her. She saw the genuine respect in his eyes. She looked at her son, standing tall in his braces, smiling up at her. She didn't need to fight alone anymore. "Okay," Maggie said, a genuine smile finally breaking across her exhausted face. "But if you start throwing tantrums in board meetings, I'm locking your neck back up." Nathaniel laughed. It was a rich, warm, deeply human sound. "Deal!" If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deeply human, grounded stories about the struggles and triumphs of everyday life. We upload new audio dramas every single week, bringing you raw, emotional narratives that show the true power of resilience. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes the biggest miracles happen in just 60 seconds. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and we'll see you next time.